Turn to Daniel chapter 2. We're going to read some verses that we have read several times in the context of Daniel's prophetic vision, but we want to focus tonight, and we're going to focus a little bit. I think we taught a lot on this particular empire last time, but we want to zero in on something especially. And here's an interesting question, and this question just came to me. I'm going to say it was 6 or 7 years ago. I thought to myself, who is the most prophesied about person in the Bible? Who is the person that God foretold the most about in the Bible? And say, okay, well, Jesus Christ, that's kind of an obvious answer. So it didn't take me long to figure that one out. And I said, well, who would it be after him? Then I thought about it, and I said, okay, it would be the Antichrist. He'd be like the next person with the most prophecies said. And then I said, okay, well, beyond Jesus and the Antichrist, who would be the next person that God foretold the most about? And curiously enough, now let me just say, I studied this out quite a bit, and I did a lot of research, books, internet, trying to find if someone else had more or less done the same search, that I really couldn't find anything. So if I'm wrong, I gave it my best shot, all right? But I don't think I'm wrong. And curiously enough, and we'll meet a few verses about him tonight, but the man that has the most prophecies written about him, I believe, is Antiochus Epiphanes, who was I don't know what number, but he was one of the more powerful rulers in the Seleucid Empire, which was one of the divisions of the Greek Empire after Alexander the Great died. But there's a catch with all the prophecies about him, and here's why. Because his life in the Bible, all the prophecies that are made about him, are done particularly because he is a type of the Antichrist. Unfortunately, he was a very evil man, and he desecrated the things of God. So God prophesies about his life through the book of Daniel about 200 years ahead, about 350 years ahead of time. But it's obvious when we follow how the Word of God talks about him that God is using his life as an example, as a foreshadowing of the kind of evil, wicked man that the Antichrist would be. So then I said, okay, well then, who's the person in the Bible that God foretold the most about, where there's not a catch, where it's God's not foretelling his life to be an example of someone else, but God's just foretelling a lot about his life. And we're going to see what the answer is tonight. And like I said, I pondered this, and I think I'm going to share what I think God is conveying about why he said the most about this man's life as a man, as a human being, more than anyone else. So here it is. So Daniel 2. Okay, so over the last few classes we've talked about these prophetic visions of Daniel. He saw these various visions and dreams and God and then Gabriel told him these speak of 4 empires, 4 kingdoms that will rise up, and they all are connected to the eventual establishing of God's kingdom on earth through Jesus Christ and the defeat of his enemies. And the first one was Babylon, the king of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, the Babylonian Empire. And then the Babylonian Empire was conquered by the Persians, the Medo-Persians, the Medes and the Persians together. And so now let's go to Daniel 2, verse 31. It says, Thou, O king, saw, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before you, and its form was terrible. This image's head was of fine gold, his breasts and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. And then go to verse 38. And just at the end of verse 38, Daniel is speaking to Nebuchadnezzar face to face, and he says to Nebuchadnezzar, You are the head of gold. So the image and the head of gold is first, and Daniel says to Nebuchadnezzar, God had told him what all of this meant. Daniel says, King Nebuchadnezzar, you are the head of gold. You represent the first kingdom of what this image that you saw in the dream and that God showed me in answer to prayer, what this image is conveying. Then in verse 39, Daniel says to him, And after you shall arise another kingdom inferior to you. And that second kingdom was the chest and arms of silver, the Persian kingdom. And then he says, the same verse, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. Now notice, Daniel didn't say to Nebuchadnezzar, and after you shall arise another kingdom, the second kingdom, the chest and arms of silver, which will bear rule over all the earth. He didn't say that about the second kingdom. But he said, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. And the third kingdom of brass was the belly and thighs of brass in the image. Okay, so now that's Daniel 2. So now let's go to chapter 7. And let's read chapter 7. And in chapter 7, Daniel saw the vision of 4 beasts, and starting in verse 3. And 4 great beasts came up from the sea, diverse, one from another. The first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. We'll skip down to verse 5. And behold, another beast, a second, like a bear, and it raised itself up on one side. Okay, and then verse 6. After this I beheld, and lo, another, like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. Okay, good. Okay, let's put this up here. Okay, so chapter 2, image, head of gold, chest and arms of silver, belly and thighs of brass. Daniel's vision, the lion with wings, the bear raised up on one side, and a leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads. Okay? And so Daniel 2, the image spoke of 4 kingdoms. Chapter 7, Daniel seeing 4 beasts. And he actually in verse 17, as Daniel was grieved and was pondering what the visions meant, apparently there were angels nearby. And in verse 17, one of the angels came to him and said, These great beasts which are 4 kings, which shall arise out of the earth. We're not covering the 4th kingdom tonight, but we're just kind of going in order. But so we see here, this is just kind of a progression here. The head of gold was Babylon. That corresponds in chapter 7 to the lion. The chest and arms of silver, the Persian Empire, corresponds to the bear in chapter 7. The belly and the thighs of bronze or brass, chapter 2 in the image, correspond to the leopard. Oh, how come I didn't write that one? That's interesting. Correspond to the leopard with 4 heads and 4 wings in chapter 7. And Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar, you are the head of gold. You're the first kingdom. And the Persian Empire would be the second kingdom. The chest and arms of silver and the bear raised up on one side. But we don't know that yet because we're just reading the scriptures and we're not talking like history has transpired. We're just kind of going with the flow. So now in chapter 8, and we'll just mention again because it's kind of good to get a handle on these dates. Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel saw this prophetic image in 604 BC. Then Daniel had the visions we're reading about in chapter 7, 54 years later, 550 BC, in the first year of King Belshazzar, who was the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar. Now chapter 8, verse 1, look at what this says. It says, in the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar. So 2 years later, Daniel's getting another prophetic vision. And it's worth saying that in Babylon is still the reigning empire, right? Persia hasn't come along yet. So that's just kind of a cool thing for us to recognize. So in chapter 8, we won't read the whole thing because we've read these passages the last couple of times. Daniel has a prophetic vision. He sees a ram with 2 horns. But one of the horns was higher than the other. And he sees this ram pushing westward, northward, and southward. And the ram became great. Nothing could stand before the ram. And as he's observing the ram in his vision, all of a sudden he sees a male goat. That's in verse 5. Look at Daniel 8:5. He says, and as I was considering, behold, a he-goat came from the west across the face of the whole earth and did not touch the ground. A goat zooming faster than running. Okay? It's like didn't say flying goat, but it was like that. Hydroplaning goat. Is that the word we're looking for? It's a hydroplaning goat. All right? And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes, and it says in verse 6, he came to the ram in fury. And in verse 7, when the goat came upon the ram, he was moved with rage against the ram. And what's just kind of a neat thing to note, kind of in the natural about this. Like if a ram and a goat were facing off, who do we think would win? The ram.
The ram.
Rams are bigger, they got the powerful curled horns. The ram should be able to take out a goat with no problem. But in this vision, this goat with the notable horn that comes from the west, zooming with great speed and filled with anger and rage, he crushes the ram and kills him. Verse 8. And the he-goat waxed very great. And when he was strong, the great horn was broken. And out of it came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of heaven. Okay, now we go to chapter 11. Daniel. We didn't read these verses last time, but let's go to Daniel chapter 11. When is this vision being given? This is being given in the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia. That's about 534, 535 BC. And what has happened? Chapter 8, we'll have to make a chart for this next time, folks. Chapter 7, 550 BC, Daniel gets his prophetic vision, enhancing the one from 54 years earlier. Then chapter 8, 2 years later, 5 48 BC. Babylon is still the reigning empire, and he gets a vision of a ram and a he-goat. Actually, I'll tell you what, let's do this. Let's go back to chapter 8 and let's see, because Daniel got specific information about the ram and the goat. Here it is. Gabriel comes to him. This is Gabriel that's going to be speaking with him. And in verse 19 of Daniel 8, this is what Gabriel says to Daniel. He says, "Behold, I will make you know what shall be in the last end of the indignation. For at the time appointed shall the end be." In other words, for the time appointed shall be at the end. Now, why is that a fascinating statement? We're not even going to study that yet. Daniel says, Daniel wants to know what this vision means for what it means for him in his time. And Gabriel says, I'm going to cause you to know what this means, Daniel, for the vision pertains to the end of the times. No, Gabriel, I want to know what it means now. Well, I'm Gabriel, sent from God and Jesus Christ, and I'm going to tell you what the vision means, and yes, I'm going to tell you what it means for the here and now, but it's for the end. And we'll see a couple of classes down the road, maybe, how this pertains to the end. But it's amazing that God was foretelling the history that would shortly come to pass. And here it is, verse 20. "The ram which you saw having 2 horns are the kings of Media and Persia." Now, why is that amazing? Because this is 548 BC. And the Medo-Persian Empire has not yet conquered Babylon, but they will in less than 15 years. But here's Gabriel giving Daniel the prophetic knowledge of it a decade plus before it happens. But then it gets even more amazing. In verse 21 he says, "The rough goat is the king of Greece, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king." And who is he talking about? He's talking about Alexander the Great, who will not come into power until a little more than 200 years after this vision. So while Belshazzar, the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, is ruling the kingdom of Babylon, the first empire, the first kingdom of these visions of chapters 2 and 7, God is already telling Daniel who the second kingdom in this progression of powers will be, that it will be the Medo-Persian Empire. Chest and arms of silver, duality, the bear raised up on one leg. But now he's saying, but then guess what? Guess who's going to conquer Persia down the road? Greece. And there's going to be something about Greece's first king that will be notable about it. And then even more information, verse 22. "When that first great horn is broken, 4 other horns shall stand up for it out of the nation, but not in his power," meaning when the first king, that great horn on the goat, in the prime of his power, he will be killed. And 4 horns will arise up to divide his kingdom, but they will not be of his descendancy or posterity. They will not be his sons. They will not be his direct descendants, which was usually the norm. And let's go now to verse 11, because now Daniel 11, this is just a few years, this is about 17 years later, 15 years later, 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia. Daniel 10, verse 1 tells us that. And now Persia's in power, but now, early in the Persian reign, Daniel is going to get additional prophetic foreknowledge about the coming empire of Greece and this unusual first king. Daniel 11, verse 2. And this is Gabriel speaking again to him. It says, "Now I will show you the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than they all, and by his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Greece. And a mighty king shall stand up, that shall rule with great dominion, and do according to his will. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken, and shall be divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, but not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion, which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be plucked up." And this is another, so think about it. Daniel chapter 2, the 3rd kingdom, belly and thighs of bronze. Daniel chapter 7, the 3rd kingdom, the leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads. Daniel chapter 8, the goat with 1 prominent horn, the horns broken off in the prime of his power, and 4 horns spring up in its place. And Daniel 11, a great king will rise up out of Greece, but he will die in his strength, and his kingdom will be divided to the 4 winds of heaven, but not his posterity. 4 heads, 4 wings, leopard. 4 horns after 1 horn, goat. Great king, killed, 4 winds of heaven. How about that for the creative mind of God? Why would God, the Holy Spirit, care so much about creativity and precise detail in revealing the prophetic plan that only he knows? It's so incredible. Why couldn't God just say, "Daniel, I want you to prophesy that after Persia, the Persian Empire, the Greeks will come along, and they'll have the first king will be great, but he'll die and it'll be divided up into 4. He could have just said that, right? But he didn't. He said, he gave Daniel a vision of animals, and the 3rd was a leopard with 4 heads and 4 wings. And then he gave Daniel a vision of a ram and a goat that almost flew, not touching the ground, who had 1 prominent horn, and then that horn got killed, and 4 horns popped up in its place, and none of those horns were related to the first one. And the same idea in chapter 11. It's like this is the mind and the heart and the creativity and the resourcefulness. And